Okay, this is for voice material, and this is actually a coroner's hearing, and the court is reading the part of the coroner. We have two witnesses that I've edited in, so some of it may not make a whole lot of, may not seem sensical, but for the benefit of getting this dictation, I did that. And let's identify.
I am Ms. Vaughn.
And I am the witness.
I am the court.
And I am Mr. Nolan.
Okay, so this is questioning and looking into the cause of death of someone. And this is counted in 25s. We're going to read every other mark. Oh, thank you. We're starting on the bottom of page 2, and we're going to read every other mark in between 14s and 15s. Okay.
Okay, and it's the court for the record. Mr. Barres, why don't you step up and be sworn, please? Called as a witness, being first duly sworn, testified as follows. Just to read that. Sorry.
Keep going.
If you would take the witness stand from me over here, I'm going to assume that you don't know anything about an inquest until you just get a little bit about the process. You are in a California courtroom testifying under oath. The purpose of this inquest is the death of Ronald Riley. The issue is whether his death is suicide or due to natural diseases.
The law requires that the medical examiner determine 3 things. One of them is the cause of death. The other is the circumstances surrounding it. And the third thing that we are involved in today is the manner of death. The manner can be natural causes, suicide, accident, or homicide. That is what the issue is today. Since you are testifying under oath in a courtroom, you want to listen very carefully to the questions. Don't guess, answer truthfully and to the point. If you don't understand a question, ask that it be repeated.
Also, keep in mind that the inquest is not a court of law. It's an inquiry into a death. Nobody is being accused of a crime. You are not on trial. We are interested in what happened to Mr. Riley.
You want assisting details and helping figure out?
Yes.
Okay.
First, would you state your name and your home address for the record?
My full name?
Yes.
Brian Keith Elliott Michael Barres III. My address is 970 Geary, apartment number 47, San Francisco, California, 94109.
You knew Ronald Riley?
Yes.
For about how long had you known Mr.
A
Riley?
little over almost 14 years.
14 years, all right. You knew that Mr. Riley died in the city on or about July 4th?
Correct.
Did you know that Mr. Riley had a disease or an illness?
Yes, I did.
And it is my understanding that you were roommates or you lived together?
I was his lover.
For about how long?
11 and a half years, almost 12 years. 12 years total.
How long was Mr. Riley been ill?
Mr. Riley was diagnosed with AIDS, full-blown, almost 5.5 years ago.
He has been treated, I understand, at Ward 86 at San Francisco General Hospital.
That's correct.
Among other places. Mr. Riley apparently has had a lot of problems with his disease, but I'm curious about a couple things. First of all, are you aware of any abuse of street drugs or illegal agents for Mr. Riley?
An occasional bit of methamphetamine is the only one I was ever aware of. He didn't use alcohol except for an occasional beer, not even a glass of wine with dinner. That has been quite a while ago, to my knowledge.
Okay, the illness that he has or had, was that getting progressively worse?
Yes, within the last month, he got much worse. He started wasting syndrome. He started becoming confused easily. He was getting dementiated and forgetful, clumsy. He fell often. I had to watch him 24 hours a day, which I did.
Was there ever any question of injury? Did he fall or cause injury to himself?
About 2 weeks before he passed away, he was in the bathroom and he stood up too fast, and the toilet and the bathtub are very close together. He turned this way and fell into the bathtub. He had had a bed sore spot on his rear end that had gotten, started to deteriorate a little bit, but he bruised that severely. And I did have to look after that pretty closely because it got pretty bad toward the end.
I take it there was no change in his level of mental activity and so forth?
Oh, no. He was sharp as a tack.
What kind of medications was he taking?
Oh, my. That list is
Quite large?
Yes, it's an extensive list.
How about the specificality, the drugs oxycodone or amitriptyline? Amitriptyline most typically would be known as Elavil.
Nortriptyline?
It's generally metabolic, although it's available.
Right.
The reason for the concern is he has those 2 drugs in therapeutic or higher than therapeutic levels.
Which 2 drugs?
Oxycodone or the nortriptyline.
Oxycodone, which would be Percocet.
Percocet.
Nortriptyline can be sold under several different trade names.
I know, at the end, after speaking to his doctor on the phone, Walter Howard at Ward 86, and Mr. Riley was starting to have a great deal of pain. He had just had a transfusion. Medications were delivered by a volunteer through the service. These were left on a door handle. Mr. Riley never got the medications. He went through a great deal of pain for several days, and his situation got much worse after that. And when I got the medications and called his doctor as far as the administration of them and what levels, because he was in a great deal of pain, I mean, he suffered from neuropathy. Basically, a breeze couldn't blow and he wouldn't feel it. I asked his doctor what to give him. Then I also at that time told him I could tell Mr. Riley was not probably going to make it through the next couple of days. It was getting to become very obvious.
Okay.
And he had suggested that we get PO morphine, which is oral morphine. When Mr. Riley passed away, the person delivering it got there after he passed away.
So the Roxanol is not something Mr. Riley had ever gotten?
No. The bottle and container were given to the person who came to the house. The paper hadn't even been torn from the pharmacy yet.
That was the first prescription for Roxanol he had gotten?
Yes.
You mentioned he was in quite a bit of pain. This was generalized or systemic type pain?
He was very achy. I mean, he couldn't even hold his head up at that last, for the last 9 hours. I had to put his head on my shoulder so he could talk. He couldn't sit up. He couldn't swallow water. Couldn't do anything. He started choking. It got to be very uncomfortable for him.
I take it that his choice was to be at home rather than...
Absolutely.
I take it from your conversation you have some medical knowledge or training?
After taking care of someone, yes. And I worked for in-home support services as a nursing attendant for Mr. Riley for the last 5.5 years as well. I was with him through all his procedures and everything that I could learn and, become knowledgeable on. I did.
Was Mr. Riley running a fever?
He was spiking fevers he would hit 101 up to the highest one he had ever hit, which was 103 the last couple of days.
Would these defervesce of their own, or did you do something for them?
Most of the time I would either apply cold compress, rubbing alcohol, a couple of times ice under the arms, and that seemed to work, or aspirin. I mean, his fevers would come down pretty easily. They wouldn't hold for very long at all.
Were there any respiratory problems when he was having fevers?
Oh, yes. But he had PCP pneumonia 9 times. Basically, he had cotton candy for lung tissue. He had no lung tissue at all. It was amazing he could breathe for as long as he did.
I take it decreased intake, diarrhea, and so forth all contributed to his wasting.
Vomiting, diarrhea, lack of appetite. The last couple of days, he didn't do anything but sit. I got him up a couple times just to move him to go to the bathroom and so on. That was it.
Was there anyone else there helping him during any of this time?
My downstairs neighbor was there a little bit to help me, but they ran errands, so I could stay at the apartment. They would go to the pharmacy, or they would go to the grocery or go do things like that. I did all the in-home stuff myself. I wouldn't let anybody else do it.
Did he need any oxygen supplementation?
On the last day, I did get from Ron Andrews Medical. I rented some oxygen equipment.
Okay.
My wheelchair and cane and all that stuff I had there, several different masks, the rebreather. I had all the tubing there he could have needed.
Did Mr. Riley ever talk about suicide or ending his life?
No.
Did he ever write any notes or take any action to?
No, I find letters and notes from him all over my apartment still now, and he was very happy being alive. We had a very good life, a very good relationship, and he is greatly missed by many people. He was a fighter. To have PCP pneumonia, CMV, esophagitis, chemotherapy at home, central line, he went through it all, and he kept going through it every step, every step.
And the last day or so, from what you are describing, he was basically very terminal at that time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Did you ever talk to the physicians at Ward 86, Dr. Howard or Stansel, or anyone else about Mr. Riley being terminal?
I asked talked to Walter about it as far as using the words terminal or death and dying. I chose the nurses and other people around. Ron didn't do that, because if anyone knew his situation, I did very well. And he knew he was terminal. He knew things were getting worse, and he accepted it.
He understood what was happening?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Up until the very end, he made decisions on his own. He was mentally capable, and his parents were on the way there. That is what he was holding on for. He wanted to see them before he passed away.
The parents were on their way before he died?
Yes, I called them and told them they needed to come because I knew it was getting close and I didn't want them to miss seeing their son. They were in Barstow and they called and Ron had already passed away. I had to tell them on the phone that unfortunately they didn't make it.
The parents drove out to San Francisco?
They were supposed to fly, but because of pride and other things, they wouldn't take my airline ticket. They decided to drive and didn't get here.
They got here, what, about a day or half day after he died?
They got here very late the next morning, like, that evening. It was like, I can't even remember what time it was. I know it was very late. They stayed for a little bit, then they came back the next morning. And I knew at that time that they had not had time to breathe, let alone make closure or do anything that they wanted to do or needed to do. The next morning when they came back, they did. They said their goodbyes and made their apologies, so on and so forth, things parents do with their children.
If you know, did the parents realize what was happening to their son prior to this?
Oh, yes, I flew them out here the very first night he was in the hospital, San Francisco General, when he was first diagnosed. I brought them out here. They were fully informed on a regular basis.
Well, how did you arrive at the decision not to report the death to anyone until the parents had been there? How did you do that?
When Ron had passed away, he asked me that I do the following things. He said, celebrate my life. Don't mourn my passing. I want you to have a party for me. So I had a party for him. I invited our closest friends, filled the house with flowers, listened to music, and we celebrated Ron's life. And his parents were on the way, and they asked me not to. Please don't have him removed before they get there. And I didn't do that. So I let him stay until I basically made the decision that they weren't ready for him not to be there. They needed to have closure and say goodbye. They deserved that, and that is what I did. I abided by all Mr. Riley's last wishes.
How did you know he was dead?
I came in, the phone rang, and I had sat with Ron for probably 10 hours by this time. I hadn't let go of him. He had his head on my shoulder the whole time, talking, so on and so forth. And I have a cordless phone, and the battery went dead, so I had to go get regular phone in the kitchen, and a friend of mine, Tracy, was on the phone, a very close friend, and we were talking, chatting, and we were on the phone for at the most, 7-8 minutes, and I said goodbye to Tracy, and I put the phone down, and I turned and walked in, and between the kitchen and the living room, then the bedroom, there's just, a doorway and French doors to the bedroom. I could see by the color before I even got close, and he wasn't talking. There was complete silence, and I approached him, saw the color, the look on his face, and I checked, and I immediately started to attempt to rescue. I started CPR, then I stopped, and I knew he was gone.
Okay, have you had some training or experience in checking for things like that?
Yes, Ron had suffered a grand mal seizure, about a 5-minute one, and he completely dropped dead in the middle of my dining room, and I had to clear his airway. I had to thump his chest several times to get him to take a breath, and because he was gone completely, there was nothing, no zip.
Okay.
Prior to working for in-home support services, I did work for an agency called Star Healthcare, where I took care of patients in the hospital, babysitting basically overnight, checking vitals, intake, so on, so forth.
All right.
If you know, did Mr. Riley leave a will?
Yes, he did. I have it with me.
Okay, to summarize what you are telling me is Mr. Riley had AIDS with wasting disease, was obviously in the process of dying. No one contributed any medication nor in any way aided his death.
Absolutely not.
And that he did not himself do anything to aid his death.
No.
No? And therefore, you're saying his death is totally due to the AIDS.
Absolutely. He quit breathing. He had even taken the nasal cannula off. He didn't want the oxygen. He had basically decided, he knew he wasn't going to go any further. He couldn't go any further.
You said he was in considerable pain?
A great deal.
All right.
But he dealt with his pain on a daily basis. Neuropathy is like that. A touch, a breeze, any pressure, makes, his feet, his legs, his arms, hands, it was very painful.
Quickly, for my education, explain medicine delivery system. Volunteers bring it?
Not always, because normally we would go to Ward 86 Satellite Pharmacy and pick up the medications after the doctor would turn in the prescriptions to that pharmacist. Since I wanted to be at home with Ron and things were getting a little bit on the you don't want to miss a moment side, if you will, the nursing agency, VNH, a nursing hospice, have volunteers that would pick up medications and things for people and deliver them to the hospital. We had done this, I believe, one time prior to the time after he had the transfusion, and there were no problems. But this time it was a new volunteer. The volunteer left the whole bag of medications on the door handle of the apartment.
You were home then?
No, we were at the hospital. He was getting a transfusion.
I see.
Obviously, someone, found the bag of medications, and being full of everything from A to Z, narcotics and otherwise, it disappeared. It took many, many days for us to get the replacements for those, obviously, because they had to look into it and so on and so forth. That put things for him. Things started sliding then.
Were there any medications that he ran out of as a result of not getting that refill?
There were several, but I called, and Ron's doctor at that time was also on vacation when that happened, and the on-call doctor at Ward 86 prescribed enough medication for, I believe, a 3-day period, which would have gotten his doctor back, into being at Ward 86.
They did not cover the missing medications for the time you were...
Not all of them, no, because he had no pain meds at the time. 0.
All right.
None. He had none. And Medi-Cal didn't cover the ones they were prescribing, and due to the fact that basically we were living hand to mouth, I couldn't afford the medications. So I had to wait until I could find another route, find a generic, find another way. But that took another 2 days.
I understand.
The system was really messed up at that time.
Basically, part of the problem is that Medi-Cal would not honor. They said they already paid once and they weren't going to honor another prescription.
Correct.
I take it then what the physician prescribed was just the basic meds like AZT or an antibiotic and nothing else?
Anti-inflammatory, antibiotics, yes.
All right.
Prophylaxis for the PCP.
Is there anything else you want to put on the inquest record?
But he lived a full life, lived it his way, and unfortunately couldn't see it through as far as he would have liked to. And the disease got the best of him and took him.
All right, and the waiting for the parents to get there and not reporting the death, you say, was largely his wish?
Yes, when his parents called from Barstow, he at that time basically had no voice, and he motioned to me to bring him the phone, and I read his lips, and what he said to me, I said to his parents. And he said to me, don't let me leave here until my parents have gotten here and said goodbye. And I promised him that I would do that, and I did so.
All right, very good then. Based on what you are telling me, we will continue to list the cause of death as bilateral pneumonia, acute bilateral pneumonia, due to acquired immune syndrome. Oxycodone and amitriptyline are present. Considering his therapeutic...
How much of a higher dose was registered?
It's higher than what would normally be considered therapeutic, but for people on long...
His doctor, as I said at that time, that would be something you would check also. I asked him to tell me the amounts to give him to relieve his pain at the time, until the PO morphine had arrived, and it may have been a little higher than before. And because of the fact he did pass away, obviously the drugs didn't get to work through his body, but they weren't much higher than they would normally have been.
As I understand, he had been on oxycodone for some time.
Yes, he had a pneumothorax. When they put the chest tube in, they had a lot of damage. He had a lot of scar tissue.
I will list the manner of death as natural. Is there anything else you may step down and leave?
I forgot to add, it's Elliot Burris Lagozolini. Okay, this now is 5 minutes of colloquy. We're going to read it about 200, 210, 220-ish. It's just 5 minutes. So let's identify.
What is my name? Wakabayashi?
Your name is...
Wakabayashi.
Yeah, good enough.
Mr. Wakabayashi for the people.
And I am, I think, defendant all the way through. Yes, it's all colloquy. I'm the defendant.
court. I am Mr. Johnson for defense.
And it starts with the court for the record. So is he going to admit the priors?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to take the admission, please?
Yes, Frederick LaRue Island is your true and correct name.
Yes.
You have a right to have a court trial regarding your priors that are alleged in information number VA 090176, and it is alleged to have 2 Penal Code 667.5B, that you suffered the following felony convictions and that you were not free from state prison within the last 5 years in case numbers YA 058918 and VA 077617. And if you were to have a court trial, you'd have a right to have the judge sit as a finder of fact. And these prior convictions can be found true only if I prove you suffered these prior convictions beyond a reasonable doubt. You'd have a right to confront and cross-examine the witnesses against you. You'd have a right to put on an affirmative defense. You'd have the right to use the subpoena power of the court at no cost to you, and you'd have the right to remain silent. Do you understand your right to a court trial and all your constitutional rights regarding your priors?
Yes.
Do you waive and give up each one of these priors, each and every one of these constitutional rights?
Yes, sir.
And do you admit that you suffered prior felony convictions in case number Y8058918, the crime being in violation of Penal Code Section 12021, subsection A1, conviction date is July 20, 2004, in Los Angeles County Superior Court, and also in case number VA077617, the crime being in violation of Penal Code Section 487, and the conviction date is December 15 of 2004 in the Los Angeles County Superior Court, and that you served a term in prison and were not free from prison custody for a period of 5 years. Do you admit these felony convictions?
Yes, sir.
And does counsel join in the waivers, concur in the admissions, and stipulate to factual basis?
Yes.
All right, the court finds the waivers are knowingly, intelligently, and understandably made, and the admissions are freely and voluntarily entered and accepted by the court. Find that there are factual bases. All right, I have read it and considered probation officer's report. Waive arraignment for judgment?
Yes, no legal cause. Was there a report prepared earlier in the case?
Yes.
Okay, yes, sir.
And any statements then?
I would ask the court, the presumptive sentence would be the midterm, and I would ask the court to impose the midterm. Mr. Island has been truthful from the date of his arrest. He admitted that he had possession of the firearm. He never attempted to evade responsibility. The gun in this case, as was proven at trial, was found in another yard, didn't have his fingerprints on it. He could have easily taken a position that he didn't know anything about it, but he's been truthful from day one. I ask the court to consider that and impose the presumptive sentence, that being the midterm.
What are the credits, time credits?
His credits, he was taken into custody on the day of the incident, which was July 15, 2005. I calculate 501 actual days plus 250 conduct credits for a total of 751.
You be in custody all this time then?
Yes, sir.
That was July 15, 2005?
Yes, sir.
Now, these are both one-year priors, right?
Correct.
And they're not mandatory?
No, it's discretionary. So the people would ask the court to impose the high term of 3 years using these prison priors as an aggravating factor, and I don't believe that there are mitigating factors, so the aggravating factors outweighing the mitigating factors, the people would request 3 years.
I guess the maximum I could give is 5 years.
Yes,
3 years plus 1 year for each prior.
yes.
It will be 3 years in Mr. Island. I guess the easiest way, just select the high term and use both the priors to make in high term.
You can do that, but may I ask why the court is doing that when he's been truthful?
Midterm is the starting point. Plus, he's had the other two priors, and one of them, he was still on parole for both of those. Plus another one, it did involve a gun again too. Same offense. That is the only reason why I'm giving you the additional 1 year. So that will be 3 years. I select the high term, which is 3 years. I use the 1 year prior as a criteria for selecting high term. 501 days actual time served credit, 250 days good time for a total of 751 days credit. $250 parole restitution fine, $250 parole revocation fine, which is stayed. $20 security fee. All right, good luck to you. You have the right to appeal to the appellate courts from the findings and orders of this court. You must file your notice of appeal within 60 days from the time of final order. Your notice of appeal must be filed in this court and not in the court of appeal. Your notice must clearly state you are appealing what it is you are appealing from, whether you are appealing from the entire order or just part of it. Your notice of appeal must be signed by you or your lawyer. If you appeal and do not have the money to hire a lawyer, the appellate court will appoint a lawyer to represent you on appeal. It is your obligation to keep the appellate court advised of your current mailing address. It then will be in touch with you to see whether you have a right to a free lawyer after you have filed your notice of appeal. If you appeal, you have the right at no cost to you to a transcript and record of the trial court proceedings.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, did the court order a DNA sample be taken?
No, I didn't, but that's ordered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this now is some warm-up from what will be a transcript. A take. So we're on page 14, and let's identify, please.
I am attorney for the plaintiff, Mr. Bliss.
I am the witness.
I am the court.
I am Mrs. Sheets for defense.
And that's Mr. Bliss, sorry, on line 9, and let's read in 14s.
Mr. Bliss, for the record. What boats did you observe at the wharf and on the river? What was being done with the boats you saw?
Object on the ground. The question assumes facts not in evidence and is immaterial.
What do you have in mind? Unless you are alluding to the particular trip of this boat, I will sustain the objection.
I want to show, if the court please, that the boats sailed on the river all day long, and I want to show what was being done. It all goes to connect up with the operation of this particular boat.
One moment. It does not seem to me that what other boats were doing on that river has any materiality except for the purpose of showing the atmosphere of the picnic. In no manner or fashion could we be bound here or in any way affected by what other boats were doing there.
We are only interested in what this boat was doing and such people as went aboard it. Objection is sustained.
Did you see Mr. Clark there that day?
Yes, he was taking passengers in his boat all day long.
Where was he cruising?
Well, just around. I guess you call it Salt River.
What did his cruise consist of? Where did he start and where did he go?
I object to that as immaterial.
I will allow the question.
Well, he would start at the wharf in the back of his cabin. I don't know the course of the river, but he would go up the river and back to the wharf.
When you say up the river, what do you mean?
Objected to as immaterial.
Objection is overruled. I will allow it.
Salt River, I guess, is what you call it.
What became of the diagrams you were utilizing?
I don't understand the diagrams very well.
In order that the record may be clear, may it be stipulated the diagram concerning which counsel is now asking his questions be marked Defendant's Exhibit A on cross-examination and offered and received in evidence subject to correction
Corrections in what manner?
in any particular that you find it incorrect.
Mark it Defendant's Exhibit A in evidence received for purposes of illustration.
Mr. Becker, do you recognize the map which is referred to and accepted in evidence as showing the conditions fairly well as they existed on the day of the accident?
Yes, I recognize the place marked camp, and this strip of water is Salt River.
Where was the Clark boat moored? This is the wharf right here.
His boat was moored right in back of his cabin at Fort Myer.
When he left with the boatload of passengers, where would he go? Which direction?
I will object to that as immaterial.
I will allow the question.
Well, do you mean on that particular ride or any time?
Did you say he was doing the same thing all day?
Yes, he would just take his boat up and down Saxton River and Salt River and then back to the wharf.
When he was on Saxton River, which direction would he go from the camp?
Objected to as immaterial. The witness has not testified when he went there, which trip it was when he saw the defendant, nor how many trips. The witness is talking about a composite number of trips.
The witness says all the trips were the same.
Did he go toward the ocean or away from the ocean?
He did not go toward the ocean, as I noticed.
How many times did you see the boat go out with passengers that day?
Oh, several times.
Did he have the same passengers or different passengers?
Different passengers at different times.
After you got on this first time, from where did the boat leave? From what point?
Object on the ground. The question is incompetent, irrelevant, and immaterial.
I think we are getting into an unnecessary field.
I was trying to have the situation characterized and to show certain things.
I do not think any particular trip does us any good unless it is the trip which resulted in the death of the deceased.
I was going to develop what took place on the trip immediately preceding this last one, and then I would follow that up with what was done on the last trip.
The witness has testified that all day long Mr. Clark took trips up the Salt River and the Saxton River, but that he did not go toward the ocean. That is in the record. What else could you develop by this last trip?
With reference to the last trip, Mr. Becker, when were you on the boat?
I was on the boat the last trip and the trip before. I never got out of the boat at all.
Was anything said to you by Mr. Clark at the time when you returned as to whether or not there would be another trip?
Yes, there was.
What was said?
I object to that. On the ground, no foundation has been laid.
I think you had better specify, counsel.
The time and place and persons present.
Who else was in the cab on the next to the last trip, Mr. Becker?
My wife and my little boy were in the front seat, and I do not just remember who was in the second seat.
In the second seat? Do you mean the seat behind the first?
I object. What difference does it make?
Counsel objected that it was not specified who was there.
Objection is overruled. Proceed.
What did Mr. Clark say to you, if anything, about the further operation of the boat?
I object to that as leading and suggestive and no proper foundation laid, and for the reasons heretofore stated.
Objection sustained. Members of the jury, we will take a 10-minute recess at this time.